From Broken Beginnings to Global Impact, a 20-minute presentation on Dr. Jean Constant's journey. Welcome. Today I'm sharing a story that challenges everything we think we know about success, education, and human potential. This is the story of Dr. Jean Constant, founder of Global Sovereign University, whose journey from childhood poverty and educational sabotage to creating a global institution proves that circumstances never define destiny. The Kerosene Heater, Early Lessons in Survival. Jean's story begins not with promise, but with harsh realities. Born into a family constellation of 7 children scattered across 2 absent fathers, he grew up in what the system called a welfare family. His mother, Eugenia, waitressed when she could find work, stretching government assistance like a magician pulling endless scarves from an empty hat. In Lincoln, Illinois, the family moved with restless frequency, each relocation accomplished in 2 or 3 carloads of belongings. They accumulated nothing. Between one address and the next, they somehow managed to shed rather than gather possessions, as if stability itself had a way of evaporating when they needed it most. At the center of their survival was a temperamental kerosene heater, their only source of warmth during brutal winters. This mechanical beast required constant attention and careful feeding. Directly in front of it, you could bake. 10 feet away, you could see your breath. The responsibility for maintaining this lifeline often fell to Jean, even as a young child. Each morning, before anything else, he would check the fuel reservoir. The kerosene had to be measured carefully. Too little, and they'd run out during the day. Too much, and they risked spillage or waste they couldn't afford. A gallon might get them through 2 days if they were careful. 3 days if they were desperate. But fuel was only part of the equation. The wick needed trimming when it burned unevenly. The glass chimney had to be cleaned regularly because soot would build up. Most challenging was the delicate balance between airflow and combustion. Too much air and the flame would flicker and sputter, throwing off acrid smoke. Too little air and the flame would die entirely. This kerosene heater taught Jean more about responsibility, resourcefulness, and the relationship between effort and results than any classroom ever could. When you're responsible for keeping your family warm at 8 years old, failure isn't an option. You learn to pay attention to details, to troubleshoot problems, and to understand that comfort isn't guaranteed, it's earned. But perhaps most importantly, Jean was learning that he could handle responsibility. Each successful day of keeping the heater running built quiet confidence that no amount of external chaos could entirely destroy. Even when situations seemed hopeless, there was always something, some small piece of the puzzle, that he could influence through his own efforts and attention. This sense of agency became a cornerstone of how Jean approached challenges throughout his life. Years later, when he encountered setbacks in school, struggles in business, or obstacles in relationships, he would remember those winter mornings when everything depended on his ability to coax warmth from a cantankerous machine that didn't want to cooperate. The power of words, academic promise. Despite the instability surrounding his household, Jean discovered early that some treasures couldn't be lost in a move or pawned to pay bills. Books became his refuge, his teachers, and his proof that other worlds existed beyond their cramped quarters and uncertain circumstances. In 3rd grade, something extraordinary happened. His teacher, Mrs. Sullivan, introduced a reading competition with elegant simplicity. Read a book, write a 1-page summary demonstrating comprehension, and earn a gold star. The stars would be displayed on a chart at the front of the classroom. While other students participated casually, Jean approached the competition with the intensity of someone who had found their calling. He read during recess while other children played games he couldn't afford the equipment for. He read in the evenings while his siblings watched television. He read on weekends when other families went on outings that required money they didn't have. Each book opened new worlds. Adventure stories taught him that ordinary people could overcome extraordinary obstacles. Historical fiction showed him that circumstances could change dramatically. Science fiction expanded his understanding of what might be possible. Fantasy novels demonstrated that even the most restrictive situations might contain hidden possibilities for transformation. When the final tally was completed at year's end, the results were decisive. While his nearest competitor had earned 23 gold stars, Gene had accumulated 57. Standing in front of an assembly that included teachers, parents, and students from other classes, he experienced something largely absent from his young life: the knowledge that excellence was possible even when circumstances seemed designed to prevent it. The reading competition taught Gene lessons that would prove invaluable throughout his life. He learned that sustained effort applied systematically could produce results that seemed impossible from the starting point. He learned that intellectual capabilities could distinguish him in positive ways. Most importantly, he learned that excellence was possible even when external circumstances argued against it. Gene also discovered an aptitude for mathematics. When teachers would call out complex problems, what is the answer for 5 plus 3 minus 2 divided by 1.5 by 6? His hand would shoot up before they finished speaking, and most of the time, his answers were correct. This mathematical ability proved useful in practical ways. He could quickly calculate whether they had enough money for groceries, determine how long heating fuel might last, or figure out whether a potential purchase fit within their severely limited budget. When the system fails, manufactured failure. At 11, Gene's family moved to Springfield, and his mother enrolled him in a Catholic school. A decision that seemed to emerge from desperation and misguided optimism about the quality of education that private institutions might provide. The most fundamental problem emerged within the first week. Gene was expected to participate in classroom activities that required textbooks he didn't possess. Due to financial constraints and administrative oversight, he had been enrolled without anyone ensuring that he had access to basic materials every student was expected to bring. Here's where the story takes a darker turn. Gene's mother enrolled him in a private school that required families to purchase their own textbooks, while his brothers and sisters attended the public school just blocks away, where books came free with enrollment. 3 siblings received books, 1 did not. Gene was the one. The realization came years later with painful clarity. This hadn't been an oversight. It had been sabotage, dressed up as opportunity. His mother had achieved something extraordinary in its cruelty. She had weaponized education itself, turning what should have been a path forward into a trap designed to ensure he'd stumble. When Gene approached Sister Cordula about this problem, her response revealed character traits that would haunt his educational experience for months. Rather than addressing the issue with discretion, she chose to make his lack of resources a source of public humiliation. Sister Cordula would force Gene to sit beside other students, sharing their textbooks, while she announced to everyone exactly how much he had achieved without books. Her tone combined false sympathy with obvious condescension. When she did praise his correct answers, it came with sharp edges. Look how much this poor child manages despite having so little. But Sister Cordula had severely misjudged her target. The same determination that had driven Gene to accumulate dozens of gold stars was not about to be broken by petty cruelty. He continued raising his hand when questions were asked. He continued answering accurately. He continued reading during every break. However, the practical consequences were severe. Without textbooks containing homework assignments, he couldn't complete the work supposedly essential for academic progress. This created a frustrating paradox. His actual capabilities and knowledge were clearly superior to many students who possessed better resources. But institutional systems for measuring achievement made resource access more important than actual learning. At the end of 5th grade, Sister Cordula announced that despite his obvious intelligence and classroom participation, his failure to complete required homework meant he would need to repeat the year. Gene knew he understood the material better than many students who would advance to 6th grade. But knowing this didn't change the institutional reality. He would carry the label of academic failure for circumstances largely beyond his control. The dental sabotage, a teenager's nightmare. If the textbook sabotage wasn't devastating enough, what came next was worse. The summer after 8th grade graduation brought a new form of sabotage that would derail Gene's fresh start in high school. Under the guise of providing the best oral care the state of Illinois could pay for, his mother authorized a dentist to extract all of his upper teeth. Gene was 14 years old, The bottom teeth, she informed him, would be removed the following year. The psychological devastation was immediate and complete. Gene had registered for high school, attended for exactly 2 days, then simply stopped going. How could he face classmates or teachers with his entire upper mouth empty? The dentures wouldn't arrive until February. 7 months of speaking carefully, eating cautiously, and never smiling. If you've ever seen an elderly man with missing teeth, you understand that keeping one's lips pressed together does nothing to hide the obvious collapse that upper teeth prevent. Gene was hideous, at least from a teenager's perspective, where appearance feels like everything and difference feels like death. Washing dishes became his refuge because it allowed him to hide from the public eye. Zero social life, zero possibility of normal teenage experiences. At an age when social connections and romantic possibilities should have been opening up, he retreated into isolation, manufactured by maternal sabotage. Gene accepted this bleak future with resignation, perhaps because resistance had been trained out of him through years of systematic undermining. When his mother found him full-time work as a dishwasher, he embraced it with the resignation of someone who no longer believed better options existed. His life might have continued on this trajectory had history not intervened in the form of America's appetite for war. Military service, the turning point. The Vietnam conflict's insatiable demand for young men created opportunities that peacetime would never have offered. The United States Navy became Gene's unlikely salvation. When he took their entrance exams, something remarkable happened. The scores revealed capabilities that years of sabotage had obscured but never destroyed. Not only was he accepted into boot camp, but further evaluation qualified him for a radioman school, an advanced technical program typically reserved for high school graduates with strong academic records. The irony was profound. There was no shortage of high school graduates qualified for A school, yet here was Gene, a boy with false teeth and an 8th grade education, being offered the same opportunity. For the first time since Mrs. Sullivan's reading competition, an institution was betting on his potential rather than engineering his failure. The Navy didn't care about missing teeth or manufactured academic failures. They cared about test scores, aptitude, and the capacity to learn under pressure. After years of being told he wasn't good enough for ordinary opportunities, he was being selected for extraordinary ones. Military service taught Gene that transformation is possible, but rarely comfortable. Boot camp stripped away civilian identity markers that had defined his sense of self. This process, which might have felt like a loss of identity to someone with more to lose, felt liberating to someone whose civilian identity had been shaped largely by failures and limitations. The training revealed capabilities that academic settings had never properly identified or developed. His mathematical aptitude became the foundation for electronics training. His reading comprehension became essential for mastering technical manuals. His experience navigating institutional failures translated into valuable leadership qualities. Gene learned Morse code until dots and dashes became a second language. Radio telephone procedures transformed his understanding of disciplined communication. Electronic principles ceased to be abstract concepts and became tangible realities he could manipulate and control. But perhaps most importantly, naval service proved that Gene could succeed when given appropriate opportunities and fair evaluation. The same intellectual capabilities that had been systematically undervalued in academic settings became the foundation for technical expertise that earned recognition from instructors and peers. Business success proving competence. Gene's first significant civilian role came at JCPenney, where a casual favor between friends accidentally changed his life's trajectory. His only qualification was a permit to operate a 16mm movie projector from his Navy service, hardly relevant to retail camera sales. He was hired as a temporary replacement for 3 weeks. What happened during those 3 weeks defied every expectation. Gene had 0 sales experience, no knowledge of photography equipment, and exactly 1 hour of training. But he had something more valuable: the work ethic and strategic thinking that military service had instilled. Within 3 weeks, He transformed the camera department from a retail backwater into one of the top 10 camera departments among JCPenney's 400-plus locations nationwide. He organized and entered a float in the State Fair Parade, something that had never been attempted at the store level in JCPenney's corporate history. When the regular department leader returned from military training, Gene was offered full employment as the permanent camera department leader. He launched evening photography classes for customers, established semi-annual free camera repair events, and beat all stores in his region in both sales and profit growth. At Kay's Merchandise Mart, Gene faced an even bigger challenge, transforming camera sales from loss leaders into profitable operations. His solution lay in understanding that camera sales were just the beginning of the customer relationship. Through comprehensive staff training, innovative incentive programs, and customer education initiatives, he increased office equipment sales from $500,000 to $5 million annually, a tenfold improvement. The marketing campaigns he created included the largest newspaper buy for page count in a single product category in the United States during the 1970s. He purchased advertising in Playboy and Time magazines, coordinated with massive local campaigns. The results transformed Kay's from a minor player into a regional leader. At Santa Barbara Savings and Loan, Gene managed enterprise-wide operations affecting over 1,500 employees. He inherited systematic problems that had accumulated over years of inadequate management. 400 purchase requests sat unprocessed, some over 2 months old. Gene implemented computer networks, vendor accountability systems, and comprehensive cost analysis that identified $2 million in annual savings opportunities. Project Chris, named after his wife, Christina, examined every non-salary expense across the entire organization and revealed numerous improvement opportunities that had been invisible under previous management. Education reclaimed, academic vindication. Despite early struggles, education remained a driving force in Gene's life. The opportunity to correct years of educational sabotage came through Richland Community College in Decatur, Illinois. But first, he had to pass remedial algebra, the same subject that had caused problems in 8th grade. The community college instructor proved no more flexible than his predecessors, insisting on prescribed methodology and using public humiliation as a teaching tool. This time, Gene was prepared. He understood this as a tactical challenge within a larger strategic campaign. When invited to compete at the blackboard, he completed equations faster and more accurately than competitors, while demonstrating the methodology the instructor demanded. When he passed remedial algebra and advanced to degree-level coursework, it represented more than academic progress. It was proof that systematic effort could overcome educational obstacles that had once seemed insurmountable. The associate degree program provided opportunities to apply military discipline and business experience to academic challenges. On June 21, 1983, Gene received notification of selection for induction into Phi Theta Kappa, the International Honor Society for 2-year colleges. The irony was profound. Here was the young man whose academic failures had been deliberately manufactured, whose teeth had been removed to prevent high school attendance. Yet when finally given fair access to education and judged solely on academic performance, he didn't just succeed. He excelled to a degree that merited national academic honor. Gene continued to the University of Redlands, completing his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration in May 1987, the same month he married Christina. The combination of academic credentials, proven business success, and personal stability provided options that hadn't existed before. Creating Opportunity, Global Sovereign University. On December 17, 1975, Alabama Governor George Wallace presented Gene with a commission as honorary lieutenant colonel aide-de-camp in the Alabama National Guard. This wasn't simply recognition for political support, but acknowledgement that a young man with an 8th grade education had demonstrated capabilities worthy of honorary military rank. The commission represented more than validation; it was investment in future service. It established the pattern that exceptional individual achievement creates responsibility for continued service that honors the trust placed in you. The founding of the Foundation for Global Instruction, operating as Global Sovereign University, represents the culmination of lessons learned through childhood adversity, military service, business leadership, and educational achievement. The university operates on a revolutionary principle. Everyone has both knowledge to share and learning needs to fill. A master carpenter in Oregon can share decades of knowledge with young entrepreneurs worldwide. A traditional healer in Guatemala can contribute wisdom that informs medical practices globally. Real education happens when curious minds engage with challenging material, regardless of institutional context. Global Sovereign University creates flexible, accessible pathways for knowledge sharing that don't depend on traditional credentials or economic resources. The model recognizes that human potential is distributed globally, but opportunities to develop that potential remain artificially constrained by systems that prioritize credentials over competence, resources over capability, and conformity over creativity. The lessons, principles for transformation. Looking back across Jean's journey, several principles emerge. First, circumstances need not determine outcomes. The same principles that enabled Jean's journey from broken beginnings remain available to anyone. Systematic effort applied to clearly defined objectives, persistence through inevitable setbacks, and faith that small choices compound into profound transformation. Second, distinguish between apparent limitations and actual constraints. Much of what appears impossible is actually just difficult. Much of what appears to be permanent limitation is actually temporary constraint that can be overcome through systematic effort and creative thinking. Third, excellence is possible regardless of starting conditions. Begin where you are, use what you have, do what you can. The most significant barriers are often the ones we accept rather than the ones that are genuinely insurmountable. Fourth, individual transformation can serve as the foundation for institutional change. Personal success creates obligations to help others overcome similar barriers. The torch of freedom that Jean carried now illuminates pathways for others to follow. Fifth, real education transcends institutional boundaries. Learning happens when curious minds engage with challenging material. Traditional credentials and economic resources shouldn't determine access to knowledge. Conclusion: help is on the way. Jean's story challenges everything we think we know about success. A boy who failed 5th grade became an academic honor society member. A teenager whose teeth were removed to prevent education became a doctoral graduate. A child denied textbooks founded a global university. The kerosene heater that once meant survival is gone now, but the lessons it taught remain relevant. Every setback contained lessons essential for future success. The instability of childhood taught adaptability. Educational failures showed the importance of self-advocacy. Military service proved transformation was possible. Business success demonstrated that competence could overcome background disadvantages. For everyone listening who faces obstacles that seem insurmountable, remember, there can be a better life, but claiming it will require everything you have to give. The choice, as always, is yours. Your current chapter, however difficult, is not your final chapter. The same principles that enabled one young boy's transformation from a kerosene heater keeper to a university founder remain available to anyone willing to do the systematic work required. Jean's mission continues through Global Sovereign University, where students from dozens of countries connect with experienced professionals who share knowledge accumulated through decades of practical application. The poster campaigns appearing in communities worldwide carry this message: rebuilding civilization, help is on the way. This isn't hyperbole. It's an accurate description of what becomes possible when barriers to knowledge sharing are systematically removed and human wisdom is treated as a global commons rather than private property. Let us conquer the tyranny of low expectations, artificial barriers, and systemic obstacles that prevent capable people from achieving their potential. Let us be the torch of freedom from despair and poverty, lighting the way for countless others who possess the capability and commitment necessary for their own transformation. The journey from broken beginnings to purposeful life continues. Help is on the way. Thank you.